Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Ward 8 Councillors Debate. My name is Gail McFadden, and I'm the Vice President Campaigns and Advocacy at the York Federation of Students. Before we begin today, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we're on. As many of us are settlers on this land, it is our collective responsibility to pay respect and recognize that this land is traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, and we're here because this land was occupied. In recognizing that this space occupies colonized First Nations territories and out of respect for the rights of Indigenous people, it is our collective responsibility to recognize our colonial histories and present-day implications and to honor, protect, and sustain this land. The York Federation of Students is also committed to creating equitable and inclusive spaces. We hope to foster an environment of discussion and dialogue free of discriminatory or oppressive languages. This is a reminder that hate speech rooted in language that is racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, ableist, anti-Semitic, or Islamophobic will not be tolerated. And if these guidelines are not adhered to, you will be asked to leave. Can I just get a thumbs up for if folks are okay with that? Great.
We need to see your thumbs too.
Let's show them. I'm glad for you. You're second once again.
Once again, welcome and thank you to all of our Ward 8 councillor candidates and all of you for coming out to today's session. When you're a student, municipal governments have a huge impact on your daily life. Municipal governments have real power to make real decisions that affect you, like whether your bus route gets cut, the size of your local library, whether there are good summer jobs available, and how long the childcare waiting list is in your area. The list goes on and on. Today is your opportunity to listen to the candidates in Ward 8 and ask them questions about the services, spaces, and facilities that affect you. The format of today's debate will be as follows. First, each candidate will have 3 minutes to read an opening statement. The floor will be open for any questions. Anyone in the audience is welcome to ask questions, but just keep in mind that the questions must be directed at all 3 candidates so that the issues are based on the issues themselves and not just the individuals. We'll then leave a couple minutes for the candidates to make a closing statement if they wish. So here we have with us today Anthony Peruzza, Suzanne Narain, and Arthur Smitherman. Who would like to go first?
Well, it was my understanding opening statements were 5 minutes.
We'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay.
Yep, that'll be okay.
Thank you very kindly. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
So,
I'll just read your biography real quick.
okay.
All right, excellent. Arthur Smitherman spent his early years in North York, and his father started his trucking company here. For the last 40 years, he has worked in the service business, both in transportation and financial services. Arthur's informal studies in anthropology led him to a diversified post-secondary education, and he has obtained about 45 credits. He obtained a legal assistant diploma from the Career College and a certificate in dispute resolution from York University. Most recently, he's been working with U.S. Securities Attorney and operating an FINRA registered funding portal. He intends to use crowdfunding to help small businesses get established and for local groups to fund their projects. Let's give it up for Arthur Smitherman.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'm particularly obliged to the York Federation of Students for organizing this debate. The important thing that I need to get across here is that the information technology age and its effects on people have been vastly underestimated, and this phenomenon is exacerbated by globalization. Society will advance more in the next 20 years than it has in the last 200. We must adapt to these challenges to remain competitive in the workplace, as a society, and in the global markets. We can look to the example of the Neanderthals and the woolly mammoths to understand what happens to those that do not adapt to their surroundings. They become extinct. At the municipal level, we can look at the case of Detroit to see what happens to a municipality that does not rise to its challenges. For some cities, it is too much, and for others, it's an opportunity to compete and be prosperous. According to Professor Holchansky's work, 3 cities, Toronto is 3 cities in 1, and they are segregated by economic class: the rich, the poor, and the middle class. The rich are getting richer and are typically well-educated and generally locate in the downtown core around the subway system, where a misappropriate proportion of city resources tend to gravitate to. Poverty is spreading in pandemic proportions in Toronto, and this is creating a drag on the middle class. In fact, 53% of Torontonians will be under the low-income cutoff by 2025. The important message here is that there are some deep structural problems in the City of Toronto, and 22 high-poverty areas have manifested due to the unequal distribution of resources. Namely, Ward 8, the M3N and M3J postal codes are amongst the poorest of Canada. We must face the reality that the city has not invested in critical components of its infrastructure. Our labor pool is undermined by a grossly inefficient transit system. The person who lives at Jane and Bloor and uses TTC to get to work in 30 minutes has a distinct competitive advantage over the person who lives at Jane and Finch, who takes 2 hours to get to work. The simplest antidote known to mankind to remedy poverty is in fact improved transit. I have supported the Ford economic agenda since 2010, and I do so for a reason. The Ford economic agenda treats the root cause of Toronto's problems rather than treat the symptoms of Toronto's problems. And the genius of the Ford economic agenda is its simplicity. By keeping taxes low, Torontonians will have an environment that is conducive to business, and it will keep precious dollars in your pocket. This is particularly important to the poor, who pay a misappropriate portion of taxes compared to the rich. It also enables us to compete in the global markets, as both human and financial capital tends to gravitate towards jurisdictions that are fairly taxed. Improved transit allows our labor pool to be more competitive. Subways make it interesting for developers. They bring jobs and housing. Subways make it possible to completely rejuvenate communities. Subways make it possible for communities to prosper for decades to come. I would point to an example I call the Hallmark model. Looking to the southeast corner of Yonge and Sheppard, having a subway in the basement of this office condo project made it interesting to Tridel to develop this project, and this is exactly what we need to do here at Jane and Finch. We have a 20-acre parcel, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's Tridel that owns it. We need to locate a business condo type operation there with the subway in the basement to entirely rejuvenate the economy of the Jane and Finch community. Stopping the gravy train at City Hall would put more money in the hands of the poor and middle class and make Toronto a world-class city that businesses will choose to locate in. I'm Arthur Smitherman, and I'm a proud member of Ford Nation, because Ford Nation means respect for taxpayers and promises made are promises kept. So please, on Election Day, support Ford Nation, vote for Doug Ford for mayor, Arthur Smitherman for city council, and Tiffany Ford for school trustee.
Thank you, Arthur. Next up, we'll have Anthony Brusa. A father, avid cyclist, and outspoken advocate in the York U area, Anthony has represented Ward 8 for the last 7 years with pride and hard work. An advocate for community programming, education, and the environment, Anthony secured funding for the expansion of the York Woods Library Theatre, the construction of the Oakdale Community Centre, and supports agencies and local groups which provide support for the most vulnerable in our society. He created property tax and water rebate programs, helping seniors and people with disabilities, and also called for major infrastructure upgrades to the roads and sewers in the community to address basement flooding, potholes, and transit issues. He led City Council in standing up to protect residents from the potential spill from the proposal to reverse the Enbridge Line 9 oil pipeline just south of Community Farm at Jane and Sheppard. Recently, he sat as the Community Development and Recreation Committee Chair and was a member of the Executive Committee. Let's give it up for Anthony Brusa.
Thank you very much. I didn't come here with a prepared text. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I grew up in the area, not too far from here, at Weston and Finch. That's when we first settled here, some 40 plus years ago. I attended York University. I've basically lived in and around this area my entire adult life. I've been working in this community somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30 years. So I go back some ways, and I think I understand the area very well. For example, I had an opportunity in the early years, in the late 80s, to actually work with York University to develop its first secondary plan. A plan that essentially is guiding today's growth of the campus. If you turn the clock back to when I attended York University, the campus looked very different. And that secondary plan, which we developed some, 25 plus years ago, is what's guiding York growth today. I supported and fought for the subway extension into this community when in the early days the plan was to just simply build a loop up Dufferin Street, connected to the Highway Corridor and back down Yonge, to solve what today is trying to solve. That is congestion on the Yonge line south of Bloor. That's what the loop was intended to do 25 years ago. So that it would create those train efficiencies that would just keep people moving, and would have, anyway. But it was far more important at the time to actually serve York University. You have a population here of some 60,000 plus students who attend the campus on a regular basis. You have some 2,400 buses picking up and dropping off people into this area. I was one of the advocates and supported the construction of the busway into the campus here, into York University, to create some efficiencies and cut down on some travel times for people and have a better connection to the subway. I have been working with the university closely in terms of its growth. The Ontario Archives building, to the engineering building, to the expansion at Osgood, and so on and so forth. Currently working with the campus at York University to develop some student housing at the south end of the campus. Hopefully to address some of the other issues, some of the other spillover issues that have occurred just south of the campus as well. So I, in fact, started the first ever Town and Gown Association for the university, to have a better connection with the students and the student groups, the university, and the city in terms of dealing with some of the other issues that have developed in and around the campus. And that organization is, quite frankly, working quite well. We have regular meetings with the university, with the students, with all of the appropriate people, municipal people and so on, to work on common issues, to work on common problems. Are we able to solve them all? No, we're not. But at least we have, for the first time, opened some links to the university in a way that we had never had before. Also worked very extensively to actually bring the university. One of the initial criticisms when I first came on the scene was that the university was very insular and didn't connect to the surrounding neighborhoods and surrounding communities. So we fought very hard to bring the university out into the community. So there's, for example, a satellite office now at York Gate Mall, where the university provides some local services and so on. So those are things we need to continue in development. And I will end it there, and we'll invariably take some questions for people that will have some questions. I apologize for my attire. I was on sign detail this morning, putting up signs, and I didn't want to be any later than I otherwise was. So therefore, did not go back to the office and get cleaned up, change, and come back. I didn't want to be too late to be here because I thought this was very, very important. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the YSF, and all of the other folks that have worked to bring this debate together, and thank all of you for attending. It's very, very important. Thank you.
And next we have Suzanne Narain. Suzanne is a local resident, activist, and educator in the Jane and Finch community of Ward 8. She is an active supply teacher at many of the local elementary schools in the Ward 8 area. Suzanne has been involved in grassroots organizing for many years. In 2010, Suzanne worked with local community residents, organizers, and unions to resist school closures across the city, and particularly in the Jane and Finch neighborhood. Their collective action resulted in schools in the Jane and Finch neighborhood remaining open. Suzanne is a member of the Jane and Finch Action Against Poverty and has been involved in several community-based actions, such as advocating for the Housing Stabilization Fund, priority neighborhood resources, and raising the minimum wage. Most recently, Suzanne has been a part of creating awareness and organizing around the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy and advocating for more transparent processes between the City of Toronto and residents in priority neighborhoods. Take it away, Suzanne.
Maybe, do I need to press a button?
Just pass this one.
Thank you all for being here. If I knew there was going to be a DJ battle, I would have practiced. Thanks YFS for organizing this, and thank you all for being here to engage in all of our election campaigns and platforms. So I'm running for City Council of Ward 8 because I feel like we need better representation at City Hall. A representative that will be willing to take a better stance on key environmental issues like 9/9 and the health impacts, and not just ensuring that it will be safer to run through our communities, but really advocating for it not to run through our communities. We need to develop a strategy that will target poverty reduction in a neighborhood, as well as a leader that will stand behind unions and ensure that community doesn't lose space, resources, and programs that benefit youth. I'm running for councillor because there are many systemic issues plaguing our community and not enough being done by the elected officials to create better quality of life for the residents here. We need to find long-term solutions to the problems that exist and not just band-aid solutions that fix things temporarily. There are structural issues wrong here, and we need to work on fixing those. Transit in the area is deplorable. I mean, it takes at least 45 minutes to get from Finch Station to the corner of Jane and Finch, or longer from Jane Station. It's a little bit better from Downsview. But I think that we need to work towards a strategy that will improve transit at strategic times. I will advocate for immediate solutions like increased express buses and more strategic buses at peak hours, even at night, to account for people who work evening shifts and students who finish night classes. It is unacceptable that 1 in 4 families live in public housing that is in a state of disrepair. It's unacceptable that 9 out of 10 families are living in inadequate housing, and these statistics are from the School of Social Work at the University of Toronto. It is unacceptable that the Ward 8 has the lowest equity score across all neighborhoods in Toronto based on the social determinants of health. It is unacceptable that many youth in the community graduate from post-secondary school and cannot find adequate employment and are drowning in student debt. There's a lack of access to employment in this community. York is one of the biggest institutions within Ward 8. I will work to develop better working relationships between York University and have been doing so through the Connect the Dots Collective. We recently held a conference last December that connected faculty at York University, students, as well as with community residents, organizers, and activists to work on how to create better relationships using an anti-oppressive model. I will work with York to ensure that a percentage of jobs on campus is accessible to people in the community. I'm committed to developing strategies that turn precarious employment into more secure and decent jobs. People shouldn't be forced to work 2 to 3 jobs in order to make ends meet, work several part-time jobs because they are not receiving the benefits of full-time employment because they don't have access to unions and reap those benefits. We need a council that will push for the minimum wage increase and demand a living wage. I've been in support of and organizing with the minimum wage campaign to taking place all across Ontario. We only got to $11 an hour. Voting on policies that can benefit those most in need. I will work with other councillors to advocate for more support and contributions by provincial and federal governments, including working with the business sector, but not depending on the business sector to fund Social Security in Toronto. Most importantly, I am willing to advocate for all members of the community, those who live in private rental buildings, public housing, homeowners, and students living in campus alike. On election day, I ask you to vote for me, Suzanne Narain, for my family, your family, and our community.
I'll just speak without a microphone and kind of project. So we're now moving on to the question and answer portion. I'd like to remind folks that when you're posing your questions, please pose them for all three candidates, and folks will take turns answering. And at the end of the question and answer period, we'll leave a couple minutes for folks to have some closing statements. So do I have anyone who'd like to?
I'll go for it.
Oh, here. From your seat, I can take the.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you everyone for coming out to the debate tonight, and I appreciate that.
That's the question. I'd like to disagree with you on a couple of points.
Okay, please.
We are at less than 15% of our operating budget in relation to capital debt. We are not, as a city, like a government, permitted.
We're paying $700 million
We're not
a year.
permitted. We're
I'm
not
sorry.
permitted.
Allow the
We're not
candidate to
permitted
answer.
to carry a deficit. So we have to balance our books year over year over year. And in fact, our annual surpluses used to range somewhere between $300 and $400 million a year. They are now ranging between $150 and $250 million a year. So we actually run a surplus. So we are not, it's this myth, we're not awash in red, we are not bankrupt in any way, shape, or form. There are limits to what we can do. We are also one of the lowest tax jurisdictions in North America. We are. That's a fact. There's another general myth that says that somehow we are not. So I want to just deal with those, because we often let that kind of language get away on us, and we just simply swallow it, hook, tied, and whatever the full expression is.
Sinker.
Hook, line, and sinker. Exactly. And it's in fact not true. So can we build transit? We are building transit. We're building a subway through York University, 8.5 kilometers, 6 stations at a cost of almost $3 billion. We have a
30 seconds.
We have a funding deal and a funding arrangement with the provincial government to expand transit across the entire region, within the city and around the city. So we are doing those things in conjunction with our other partners. One of the difficulties that we have, and Suzanne, I believe, touched on, is how do you make it more efficient? How do you reduce those travel times? The problem is that our city is so vast. It's not like downtown Paris or downtown Rome or New York or Manhattan for that matter.
That's time.
Territorially, we are enormous.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cookson. Next, we'll have Suzanne to answer the question.
Well, it's not here to confirm, but I believe the question was, can we use private dollars to pay for transit? And no, I do not support that, because I believe that. I keep wanting to sing along with the music that's happening in the background, with the microphone as well. But so can we use private dollars to pay for public transit? So no, I do not believe that that is an acceptable solution, because I think that transit, like many other services, should remain a public service. And in allowing private corporations or private donors to sponsor this type of service will increase privatization and corporatization of public services. And this will lead to perhaps higher user fees, more surveillance, things of this nature. And while there may be a faster and improved city services, which is ideal, however, this will also mitigate the amount of people who can access these services, and that is not the goal. I think the goal here is to get the most people moving across the city the fastest, not who can afford to use services. So I think that I don't believe that we should allow private corporations to pay for this. What I do think should happen is that we should continue to advocate or pressure the provincial and federal government to fund this, and look for better strategies within the city to allocate funding for the transit or improve transit.
And next we'll go to candidate Smitherman.
Okay, well, I'm not really sure about the question. It was quite big, but if it's okay, I'd like to deal with the issue of funding transit. And in fact, I'm going to deal specifically with the Jane Finch corridor. The Jane Finch corridor may be the most economically feasible transit corridor in the city, and the reason is simple. Shopping centers love traffic, and to get them to contribute to the building of a subway station on or around their land is entirely socially responsible for the city to expect them to contribute funding for it. And the funding can certainly take as long as 20 years to pay for a subway system, because they have a very long shelf life. So if you look at this from Woodbine Centre, you have a Woodbine Centre, the shopping centre, which doesn't get much traffic and is in a bit of trouble. And of course the racetrack to the south of it, I think they've got about 200 acres there. So if you assume that those acres are worth $1 million presently, and they pay $300 million to have their subway station installed there, then they've made an enormous amount of money. So why shouldn't they pay for their subway system? The same goes to Humber College. Certainly the Fed and the province should kick in money for them to get a subway system. And then we go from there to over at Albion Mall. Now $300 million might be a bit rich for them to pay for a subway station, but we already know that the 300 million figure for a subway station is ambiguous, because we have subway stations now presently that have been built for 35 million. And the cost per kilometer is closer to 80 million, not the 160 million that some people say. So that's my suggestions on how to fund the subway systems. Ideally, it should be 1/3 city, 1/3 province, and 1/3 Fed, but it's going to be difficult to get money out of the province. The Fed has a better.
It's time. Thank
Well,
you. We'll
they
move
have
on.
to
I'm
contribute
sorry.
to the
We'll wait
city
for the
block.
next question for folks to continue speaking. Do we have a question from the audience? In the middle there?
Rising tuition fees and the rising cost of living, students who work minimum wage jobs, like myself, struggle to make ends meet. Would you support Toronto in lobbying the province to increase the minimum wage to at least $14 per hour?
Thank you for your question, and the short answer is yes, absolutely. I support the minimum wage campaign. I also support the living wage campaign, which is pushing for a little bit more than $14 an hour. The NDP is also pushing for $15 an hour, which is absolutely necessary. I mean, I think that the $11 increase is just almost an insult to the rising cost of living in Toronto. And you mentioned something. You mentioned the high tuition fees, and I think that is enormous. And I think as a councillor, I think that it is important to advocate for the decrease or the freezing of tuition fees. I mean, it is like there is no way to start a life after 4 years of university. Many people take student loans. Their families can't afford it. I mean, many middle-class families are sending their children to school with one or more children attending university. That's easily, you know, $40,000 times 2 kids. Oh, one. Okay. All right. So I mean, I support advocating for reducing student fees and working towards better opportunities to reduce student debt after they leave or after they graduate with OSAP. pushing for a freeze in tuition at the very least. Students shouldn't be criminalized for trying to attain a better life and pursuing their education.
Yes, absolutely, there's no question about that. And in fact, I guess to try to explain it, what we as a city have been doing, and trying to do, some of us at least. For example, what was mentioned earlier is, I believe in, not me, he believes in, I don't know, what do you call it, Fordian economics, or Fordian?
Actually, there is a school of economics
So,
called
okay.
Ford, but it's not tied into this
Okay. Which basically says, and as I understood the opening statement to say, and that those economics actually keep more money in people's pockets and somehow make them wealthier and sustain a middle class, which is absolutely not true. So bogus. What, for example, you take a $25.40 an hour job, a guy who was following a garbage truck down the street, municipal employee. You privatize that activity, which I did not support. And you basically take that job and you reduce it to $17 an hour. And the difference is really becomes profit for private companies and dividends for basically out-of-country investors. So now you've taken a worker, you've made life more difficult for them. More difficult for them to carve out a living and sustain their families. But somehow it gets sold as a package where it works to keep taxes down and more money in workers' pockets, which is absolutely not true. In fact, the reverse is true.
Actually, what you're talking about would have been quite appropriate in years previous, and it might work now. But what happens when you do things like that is you undermine the economic competitiveness of the area. So I can't support that. In fact, I don't believe there should be any minimum wage at all, and I'll tell you why. Because more and more neurologists are finding that people learn more from working than they do from their innate personality attributes and their education. So when you've got some entrepreneur who wants to start a business but's prohibited from doing so because of the cost of labor, that cheats some person who might want to learn some job, trade, whatever. So it might not be critical for the economy right now to think in those terms, but with the coming economy, this is something we have to think about, or we will become the woolly mammoths and the Neanderthals, because the work will go to the Philippines and India, and that's already happening. There's 15,000 virtual assistants employed by Toronto corporations right now, working for $2, $3, $4 an hour.
We'll take our next question from the audience.
Okay,
Gentleman out here.
I'd like to address the candidates at the table in regards to LRT. What I want to first of all point out before they discuss it is many years ago, Scarborough could have had a subway, but Mr. Gus Harris, who was mayor of Scarborough, of course, NDP member, voted against it. And Scarborough's been suffering for years. If you take a subway from Scarborough, it's going to take you on the RT and then the LRT, the subway downtown. It's going to take you almost 2 hours, an hour and a half. A person can get on from Etobicoke and they can get downtown quite quicker. So I've had many discussions with the candidates in regards to subways versus LRTs. And I'm 100% for subways. I believe subways is the only way, and I'd like the candidates to address my issues. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with candidate Spinner.
Well, firstly, a lot of the information about LRTs, particularly over the last 4 years, has turned out to be ambiguous as we start opening up the filing cabinets of various DTC planners, and they've been telling us for 10 years that they're junk, and they are junk. That's literally the word for them. They don't move people any faster. On top of that, they destroy the economies of the local areas. They make it difficult for EMS to get around, and they make some intersections impossible for vehicular commercial traffic to negotiate. And if you want to see the virtual proof of it, the videos are on my website, Art for Ward 8. You can check it out for yourself. Now, the economic argument between LRTs and subways is also ambiguous. We've been getting bad information from the onset. The subways can be constructed for about 60 to 80 million per kilometer, not including the cost of subway stations, which is, we've been told, is 300 million. We've already got subway stations that have been built for 35 million. So, one of the most important things that we need to understand about subways is subways completely rejuvenate local community economies. LRTs destroy them. Just go down to St. Clair and look for yourself. I delivered milk on St. Clair in 1980, late 80s, and all those local butcher shops and the produce shops, they're gone. And this isn't about big box stores and competing with them. They just couldn't compete for the 2 years that they were under attack. An attorney I know had his office there. I asked him what it was like. He said, Art, he said, now I know what it's like to be bombed. That project went on for twice as long than it was supposed to, and it came in at almost 3 times more the budget that it was supposed to. And then when they had it built, they had to rebuild it because the sidewalks and the curbing wasn't compatible with the new streetcars they opened. So LRTs are junk. Don't let anybody ever tell you an LRT works, because they don't.
Next to Councillor Krutza.
That's not true at all.
Sure,
That's
let's
just,
go
that's
for
just,
13.
that's just another,
So, the answer.
that's just another, you know, sort of, that's bogus rhetoric. We don't have an LRT on St. Clair. You have a streetcar line running on St. Clair, so it's not an LRT. And even that street line on St. Clair has revived it. Before that, if you went down to St. Clair, the street corners and the undergrounds were taken over by young guys with big dogs. There was gum, sticky gum stuff all over the sidewalks. It was, for all intents and purposes, dying. Go down to St. Clair now.
Yeah, right.
Right?
I'm sorry, please be respectful
Go
of the
and
Drive
see
down there.
the thriving businesses on St. Clair and so on. And in fact, the local councillor, the biggest advocate of the LRT, of the streetcar line on St. Clair, has been re-elected several times by bigger and bigger majorities. So we're going to build a 3-stop Scarborough subway at enormous cost, almost $3 billion.
Should have been built 30 years ago.
Serves very, very few people. There was a brilliant LRT line with 8 stops, reaching far more people, bringing stops far closer to where people live, and actually contributing to the local economy far more than a subway ever will. But we are going to, if the current plan continues, we're going to build this hallowed subway at a cost of $1,200 a household right across the city. It doesn't come for free.
You're still thinking like Gus Harris 20 years ago.
Woodbine Mall didn't come to the table. They had the opportunity to raise private monies. No one came to the table to build that subway. Not a single nickel from the private sector. None of the malls, none of the big property owners came and said, by the way, here's my stash of cash for this subway. It didn't occur. It's pie in the sky. And to tunnel a subway is $300 million a year, right? $300 million a kilometer, not 30 million. And to build a station is somewhere between 100 and 150 million per station. The LRTs cost 80 million. Now, I can build them cheaper. You have start up a construction company. You'll
Why didn't you
it'll
have
all be your
LRT,
work.
LRT at York? So simple.
We'll have
Because it doesn't work.
I'm sorry, sir. We'll have the final candidate make their remarks on the question.
Thanks for your question on the LRTs versus subways. I think I do support the LRTs. The LRTs are cheaper, more cost efficient to make, take less time to make, and research shows that in fact LRTs are more economical, can transport more people than buses and on subways. If you want to Google, if you have access, or later we could talk and I can provide you some information, just Google Code Red Toronto and they'll show you the sizes of LRTs and the street sizes. With the implementation of the LRTs, the streets will be expanded to ensure that vehicles will be able to move just as easily, will not interrupt any type of services, and more people will in fact be able to travel across the city. The fact is that not everyone is going to the downtown core. There are many people who are traveling within the city, and LRTs will improve that service. And more importantly, they will also provide a means for more jobs. With the implementation of LRTs will be the LRT yards. There is a plan to build LRTs in the neighborhood and a spot where there will be an LRT yard. This space could also be utilized not only for the LRTs to be kept and stored, also utilize space for extra jobs or more jobs in the community, also as a community space. I mean, we could think about, or we can advocate for using this space not only for LRTs and employment, but also having access to community space in these hubs. So again, I do hear your concern with residents in Scarborough or other parts of the city who are not being able to access the subway, but in fact, subways cost more money to make. They are necessary, but LRTs are a cost-effective strategy that will move people around the city effectively.
Thank you. We're going to do a final call for questions at this time. So if folks have a question, if you can throw your hands up, and we'll get to you in succession.
This is Canada, man. I'm allowed to speak.
With respect.
And I would also like to note that when you're asking candidates questions or when the candidates are replying, please be respectful. Sir, in specific, security has asked that you be respectful of the individuals who are speaking, or you will be asked to leave. And that goes to the rest of the room. Please be respectful of the individuals who are speaking, both from the crowd and at the table.
I'm respectful, but I have to
Thank you, sir.
say as well.
We'll have the next couple questions, and then closing remarks will be happening. If folks can throw their hands up again for who is interested in asking a question. All right, I have over here, here, and then here.
Hello, thanks for coming. My name is Mandy Hickman. I'm Manager of Community Relations with York University. And my question is for all the candidates, recognizing that youth unemployment is a big issue in the city, and in particular in Ward 8, I'm wondering if you can speak to how you're going to increase opportunities for youth, particularly new grads. Thanks.
I don't want the camera on me. Everybody.
That is probably, not just in the city, one of the biggest problems that we have in this area is precisely that, lack of opportunities for young people at all age levels, not just young people who graduate with university degrees. Because the young folks that graduate with university degrees, they will have their own way of finding their own opportunities. And the city quite literally plays a very minor role in that. But where we have to focus as a municipality and where we can create opportunities is within those age ranges and age groups where we can employ them, we can give them things to do, we can involve them in mentorship programs. We can involve them in giving them skills that will help them as they move through, and both through school and into adulthood. So the city is the single biggest employer of young people in the city. We employ young people in all of our Parks and Rec program. We employ thousands of young people. We've created opportunities, for example, in Toronto Community Housing, where we've employed youth to educate and communicate, for example, environmental refurbishments that we've been doing. We take young people out of the community, or we've been working to take young people out of the community and link them up with the building trades through programs like the Hammerheads, where young people are identified, they're connected to specific union locals, and they're given skills, whether it be an electrician, a plumber, a carpenter, and so on. And we've been actively doing that. But there's a limit, and there's a limit to that capacity. The provincial government, for example, recently allocated about $300 million towards youth employment and in creating youth employment opportunities. Not a single dollar of that has been earmarked for communities at risk or youth at risk in neighborhoods like this one. And we have been asking, as a city, I've taken the lead on that as the chair of the Community Development and Recreation Committee, as a city, for them to restructure that program where we're able to flow some of those monies and some of those opportunities to these neighborhoods that are highly at risk.
Thank you. On to Suzanne.
Thanks for that. I think that's a really, really important issue that we talk about. There's a layered answer to that question. First, I think that that many youth have been given the false, or been sold that false hope and promise that you go to school, get an education, you'll get a good job. But the fact is, many people are going to school, have their education, don't have a good job, living at home, have $60,000 of student debt, or $40,000. A few weeks ago, or last semester at York, there was a bunch of signs or people plastered on the walls of how much their student debt is, and it is ridiculous. That should be illegal, that people are finishing post-secondary education with that much debt. It is enough to make a down payment on a mortgage. It is enough to travel the world for maybe 2 years or something. But students shouldn't be graduating school gaining this opportunity with that much debt in hand. There is no way of starting a life in that capacity. I think also, to add to the layer, that there is an infrastructural issue with the lack of opportunities for youth in this community and youth across the city of Toronto. The city of Toronto has the highest unemployment rate for youth than the entire province, and that signals a problem in Toronto. We need to work. There's a report that was put out that recommends, this is their words here, that quote, a portion of all jobs created by future public infrastructure projects should be allocated for young workers. This threshold should be determined for each project by government, labor, and community representatives, and should at a minimum match the percentage of young workers in the labor force. So here we have recommendations, people who have done this research, who we could say, okay, this is how we can get youth at work, not just, yes, it's important to develop skilled trades, but we need to ensure that there will be jobs at the end of the tunnel, that we will work on a strategy that will ensure that businesses and institutions like York University are offering these jobs to youth. Something that I spoke about earlier is ensuring that there is more opportunities for people who live in the community to access jobs at York University. Any unionized job at York University will allow students, or will allow the children of those people to go to school for free here. And I mean, you have a community with the lowest equity score in all of Toronto, and a large institution like York University right in the backyard, and not being able to offer those key economic opportunities is unacceptable. So in closing, I think that we need to seriously develop a better strategy, not just airy-fairy, like a real better strategy that will really ensure that businesses, institutions, corporations, government sectors are making a commitment to ensuring that youth are going to be hired after post-secondary, and not just youth, like Anthony said, but all people in the community, because this really impacts not just youth, but every adequate employment.
Candidates.
Thank you. I'd like to address that answer or the question in 3 layers. Firstly, there's good and bad in everything. Some of the unions have done an excellent job integrating training and apprenticeship jobs. It'll be the operators, the laborers, carpenters, plumbers, and electricians. And there's some other guilds and so forth that are fairly good at it. Many of the other unions have not been socially responsible. They don't offer co-op programs, they don't offer internships, they don't offer any special training, and they don't integrate you into any employment. So there's a problem there. We need to make the unions, all of the unions, more responsible. And we also have a labor-sponsored funding program here in Ontario, and I don't feel that the unions are fully investing their pension funds into projects that build sustainable jobs in the Ontario economy. They go offshore. I'm sorry to tell you that, but that's the reality. The second issue is the land transfer tax. Now, I don't profess to know the full economics of it. Ideally, we would like to see it removed, but can we balance the books on that? Now, if we were able to have it removed, or at least eliminated over 4 or 6 or 8 years, that would definitely, without a doubt, put more youth, particularly youth at risk in poverty areas that don't particularly have any great skills, that will get them employed. But it's an entry-level job to get them into the other unions, get them out there and get them experience and so on and so forth. The last thing that we're grossly overlooking, and I discussed this in the first part of my opening statements, the economy's changing. We've got to wake up. We're faced with globalization. This is information technology. The corporate executive downtown can get somebody from the Philippines for $2 or $3 or $4 an hour. Why are they going to hire a York University student for 15? I'm very sorry to tell you that, but that's the reality. Conversely, we're moving more into a service economy. That means entrepreneurship. My father, when he was 15 years old, worked for the city of North York, busting sidewalks up, and he had his own dump truck. Okay? We're moving into a more service-based economy, and we need to start looking at entrepreneurships. You've got to start being responsible for your own occupation and making your own opportunities. Brian, there's no rebuttal in these questions.
No.
So you don't seem to understand that. I don't mean to be rude to you.
No, I have a different.
But you're not, these questions are not subject to rebuttal. Is he allowed to ask questions at the end?
If you wish to, no, like we've
They
closed
want
the
to keep
speakers
with the
list.
flow.
There's-
She's got to keep it organized, Brian. There's no opportunity for
Thank you. There's one more speaker on the speakers list. I believe the individual at the back who had a question has left, but we have a question over here.
I have a question too.
So we'll ask the final question. You already asked your question, sir, and if you continue to disrupt, you'll be asked to leave.
I'm not interrupting, I'm right there.
Thank you. To our next question.
Hello. I recently moved into the neighborhood. I would like not that in my face, please. Thank you very much. Can you please turn it off? Can you please turn it off?
It's not on you. Just pointing down and ask your question.
He's got enough pause.
My question is, I'm a new faculty member here, so I've just moved into this community in that I brought my family. I have a very young child who's 4 and a baby who's 18 months. As a parent who's in this community, who works at York, I'm wondering about what are your stances on resources such as community centers, libraries. Parks are really important to me, right? I also want to know, how are we engaging with the TDSB, and what are your trustees' policies as well? Because there are parents, there's families in this space as well. So, thank you.
So we will start with Suzanne and then come to Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. I am a strong advocate for supporting community space, community centers, and resources, including the library. A very critical issue, I think, to talk about, is particularly in this community, is that many art-based programs have been under attack in the community, and I think it's very crucial that we discuss that. In other parts of the city, there is a key investment, or there's an investment in art, there's investment in community space, but these spaces in the community are not being accessed, people are not able to access these spaces because of the closures of these spaces. And there is not enough advocacy in terms of the city, on the city level, to say that, hey, this space needs to stay within the community. I'm particularly referencing the Palisades Media Arts Academy that has shut its door, that did receive Trillium funding, that was an arts-based space that now youth do not have access to. In terms of how do we support this within TSB, I mean, I'm a teacher as well, so I think that there needs to be better school community relations. Running for trustee, and my co-partner in this is Sabrina Gopal, and we really support it, engaging school community relations, making schools more accessible to families, where schools can act as hubs, where families can go there, be engaged with teachers, be engaged in their children's learning, and be advocates for their students' learning. I think that green space, we have beautiful green spaces in the ward. The problem is we don't necessarily have access to all of these spaces. Sometimes parks are closed, or community, not necessarily here, but particularly in the Rexdale community, there is a Roundtree Park where many people in the neighborhood would go down there for picnics and things like that, but the park was closed, people can't access it any longer. There is the Black Creek Community Farm close to Jane and Steele's that is accessible to families. I support community members being more engaged in those spaces and really advocating for food security. So not just working with the libraries, community centers, but all of the community resources and assets where families and all people can access these spaces. Often youth are being marginalized and not being able to access these spaces. A lot of these community spaces have received funding from the Toronto Strong Neighborhood Strategy, also known as Priority Neighborhoods. With the diminishing of those funds, caused the closing of those spaces and programs. So I mean, there's also a structural issue here where there is spaces and programs offered, but not enough funding to support those key essential resources.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I agree with you. All those things you mentioned, parks, libraries, schools, those are the things that make a community work, that make a community of sorts. And quite frankly, all of us have been under attack on all of those things because of, under the guise of gravy train and cuts, there has been a very, very aggressive attempt to reduce library hours, to basically whittle down parks development and community center programming and recreation programs and so on. And I have been very, very consistent in my opposition to those reductions at every level. In fact, as it relates to parks, I was very, very aggressive and instrumental in having the bylaw changed in this area, where when developments come online, for example, new developments, they were under the old rules required to provide 5% either cash in lieu or parkland by the planning map. That's what we could get from developers. But we have now a new mechanism which, if applied, can expand that anywhere between 5 and 20%. It's called the alternate rate parkland dedication bylaw. I was instrumental in having that applied around this community so that when we have activity, we can actually get some resources to be able to develop the parks, to be able to expand on our green spaces and so on. With respect to the schools, I agree with you. The local schools, because of the funding formulas provincially, are now in a position where they need to downsize their space. So they've been looking at severing off their fields. For example, Lalaya Middle School, not too far from here, just south of Finch, Sentinel, was looking at selling off a portion of its field to generate a few. That's why I'm supporting and endorsing Matthias de Dovides for public school trustee, because we need to have better lines of communication so we can find out when those closures are coming way before they actually, we have to sort of fight it with the pickets when the school board's at the tail end of those decisions.
And now to candidate Smitherman.
Okay, I supported the community hub concept in 2010 when I ran. I worked with another school trustee, John Gordon. I find that Tiffany Ford has very similar ideas, but it's not just opening the schools up to be the community hub for things like more daycare, after hours, programs for kids, groups that want permits and so on and so forth. The community concept, community cohesion, is a far bigger and more important concept than we give it credit to, because it creates a specific deterrent in the neighborhood, okay? So this is another reason why we want people to be able to have space close to their community where they can walk, not where they have to take the bus to a community center where there's only 2 or 3 per ward. The schools need to be opened up so they're fully resourced. Some of the people that are going around are paying property taxes. They've had their kids have grown up and left school a long time ago. They've never been in the school in 20 or 30 years. They want it opened up too, because they don't want to see young women paying $300 a week for daycare when they could be utilizing the school facilities, creating groups, support networks, so on and so forth. But the school system could also be used for dispute resolution, community health, nurse, and family law situations. So the schools are an underutilized resource. I'm working with Tiffany Ford because she understands that. She's running for school trustee, obviously, and we will be pushing very hard for the full utilization of school resources, absolutely 100%.
Thank you to everyone who asked questions today, and also thank you to the 3 wonderful candidates who were kind enough to come and speak to folks at York University. With that, we'll move on to closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their closing statements, and after which I encourage folks to check out generationvote.ca to see how we can prove that not only are we a generation that is engaged and is obviously aware of what's going on in our municipal politics, but also that does come out and vote. So we'll start with Suzanne on closing statements, and just a reminder that you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think I'm just going to use this time to sort of recap some of the questions and discussions that we spoke about today and some of the commitments that I spoke about. So moving forward as a councillor candidate, I do propose that we work with the provincial government to demand a minimum living wage of $14 or better yet $15, that we work to support decreasing tuition or freezing tuition. I support community service, which includes extending library hours or keeping them open longer, ensuring that community has adequate access to community space, and support in stopping the criminalization of youth in this community. I think is particularly important that we didn't talk about today. Providing more access for youth and all people to have better access to jobs and employments, specifically working with institutions like York University, TTC, and the soon-to-come Pan Am Games to ensure that this community will receive some employment security through these key institutions. I have been a long-time grassroots organizer, educator in many of the schools in the TDSB area, and now asking for you to vote for me for school. I'm in my teacher hat right now. For City Councillor for Ward 8, for my family, your family, and our community, for Suzanne Narain for City Council, and Sabrina Gopal for TDSB Trustee. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for YFS for organizing this event.
Thank you very much to the folks that are having this debate today. It was a lively discussion. We touched on a number of issues, and I'm fully committed to continue to work with the university to do some of the things that we are currently doing, and some of the things that we need to do. Things like finishing off the construction, the subway construction, getting that to finally work. We need to do something on Finch Avenue. We don't need to have a grand debate all over again about what we do on Finch. I think we have a plan to build an LRT on Finch. I think that that's something that needs to proceed and needs to proceed fairly quickly because it'll better integrate this neighborhood. The university has got plans, and we need to motivate the university to move forward on these plans to build decent, what I believe to be affordable student housing, safe student housing on the south portion of this campus. We have some local issues that has been created by lots of students living off campus. I think we need to bring them closer to the campus. I think that that plan is very good, and I think that we need to move on it to make the situation for folks up here better. Similarly, we need to continue the dialogue that we have started with the Town and Gown Association we've created with York University. It's an important dialogue that needs to happen, and the intercommunications between the Student Federation, the faculty, and the administration of York University, along with all of the different city departments that have and play a key role in making life better for the people that live in and around the campus and for the students who come to study here on a daily basis. So we're going to continue to work on those plans, and I hope that folks here will support us. Anthony Peruzza for City Councillor, and Matthias de Davidis for School Trustee. Thank you all very much.
Okay, so firstly, once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming. I know you have very busy schedules and there's other things you can be doing, so thank you for getting involved in a participatory democracy. I believe that I have some competitive strengths over my two candidates. One, I don't lean to any form of extremism, which both my candidates, fellow candidates, have a record of doing. And I'm a mutual interest negotiator, first and foremost. I don't view things in political paradigms, left versus right. I think that will bring better value to every single person in the ward, but it also makes me more collaborative than most people. So Ward 8 in many respects is a city of three cities in itself, is that we do have a very large, prosperous business section which really isn't integrated with the rest of the ward. We also have the middle class and the poor, and of course the York University, which is virtually an untapped resource. And collectively the resources are working together to bring the best value for everybody. So I'm trying to find some openings and so on and so forth where we can better leverage our resources and get more out of this for everybody, but I'm also involved in crowdfunding. So many of the projects that are both for entrepreneurs and for people with various special interests, we can certainly look to crowdfunding, and I'm certainly capable of supporting them and helping them along their way in that regard. So please vote for me, Arthur Smitherman, on October 27th, and please consider voting for Doug Ford for mayor and Tiffany Ford for school trustee.
Thank you again to everyone who attended today, and I would also like to thank Suzanne, Narain, Anthony Peruzza, and Arthur Smitherman. Thank you.